Yes, that's right, everybody. Severance, Season 1, Episode 7. We know all about it here on the We Know Severance podcast on RHAP. We know scripted TV. We know how to dance. We do it like this. If you're on the video version, you can see us doing some slightly weird, defiant jazz. That's over at the RHAP We Know Scripted TV YouTube page. If you're listening to this, I'm Josh Wigler, wiggling my arms right now alongside the great Dr. Amanda, just spaghetti dancing.
You put the Wiggler in
Yeah,
Wiggler,
that's
Josh.
it.
Yeah, very, very, very good moves in this episode, and we also know now where the watermelon's been all this time.
Melissa,
That was my big takeaway too. I was
they
like,
saved
the
the
watermelon.
they saved the watermelon for their like funerals. This is kind of hardcore.
Yeah, that's dark. I wasn't gonna call it a funeral, but you're very right.
I mean, is that not what this is that we get in this episode? A really eventful episode of the season. I think that catalyzes a lot, whether it's Bert's at least ceremonial death as he is retired from Lumon, and Irving takes a real stand about that. Maybe it's Grainer's literal death as he has his brains bashed in with a baseball bat. And then it's Gemma's resurrection, as it turns out that Mark Scout's wife is not necessarily dead. It turns out it just might be that Mark Scout's wife is Miss Casey. Dr. Amanda, do you
Wow.
appreciate all of those facts equally or some more than others?
I think that if I had to elevate a fact that you just named in this episode, and I can take myself back to the first time watching this episode when it originally aired, discovering the reveal that Miss Casey is in fact Mark Scout's late wife, allegedly late wife, or at the very least a clone of said.
At bare
Like, at the
minimum,
very least.
Yeah.
bare minimum, a clone is what we're dealing with. Here, folks.
Yeah, that's pretty mind-blowing. I might have shared this when we originally were covering Severance those years ago, but when my husband and I watched Lost together, Josh, and you might appreciate this because you're a fan of Lost, we coined the term
Underrated story.
Yeah, underrated story.
Yeah,
I did
yeah.
just take a swig of my water bottle because that's
seldom
definitely like
reported
Lost
story.
mentioned. Drink. Yeah.
We coined a term, MBR, mind-blowing reveal, and it was like the phenomenon of watching a Lost episode and then you get that bam, oh
Yeah.
my god, what the hell is that? And it's on a binge, it is the thing that makes it impossible for you to stop watching the show, no matter how tired you are, no matter how late at night it is, no matter how many other things you should be doing. When a show hits you with an MBR like Miss Casey
Yep.
is Mark's wife, then that's when, if you're not taking your time because you're podcasting week by week, you have to watch the next episode.
No choice. You've got no choice. When it's an MBR, especially.
Yes.
I think, Dr. Melissa, can you remember what it was like on the eve that we learned Miss Casey and Gemma at least appear to be one and the same?
Yeah, I think it was one. First of all, again, I have such a bad memory for the shows, and I was like, "Wait, it's this episode that we learned."
Were
this?
you
Because it
surprised,
feels
Melissa? Did
early."
you forget?
No, I didn't forget. I'm not quite that bad, but I forgot it was this episode because even like as he's ripping up the photo, I was like, "Doesn't this happen like 2 episodes from now?" To me, it feels like a big like finale moment. But you know, if you're watching for the first time, buckle your seatbelts because we're not done with the with the big moments.
Not even close.
But yeah, and it's one of those things where like it feels so heavy-handed in retrospect, and yet at the same time, I don't think like I'm sure some people out there figured it out. I did not figure it out basically until he starts reciting facts about his wife. That it's like, oh, I get what we've been doing this entire time. But yeah.
Were we on the pulse of this? Do you remember, Amanda?
It was in the mix. Like, this was one of the theories that was in the mix. And I don't know if one of the three of us can take credit for it, but I think we got feedback to this effect. And this was on the subreddit buzz, that this was a possible thing that Miss Casey was Mark's wife. So it was something that had been discussed on the podcast prior to getting this reveal. I was like skeptical of it at the time. I thought that that was going to be a little bit of a bridge too far. And like Melissa in this episode, when he starts like shaking around the picture and when we get the facts thing, I was wondering, oh, was this a place where they teased it, and if
Right.
you paused and took a screen cap, you could say, oh, it looks a little bit like Miss Casey in a hat. But I was relieved that we got the reveal over with in this episode, and it wasn't something that was stretched out. So yeah, we were on
That would have
to
been
it.
one of those moments where if we weren't just like as an internet hive mind gluing the pieces of paper back
Yes.
together, I do think like at the very least you would have left that and been like, okay, so Mark's wife is somebody familiar to us. Like
Right.
we're like that's
Mhm.
like maybe people could have thought it was Helly or something like that. But like Mark's wife being familiar to us would have been a dead giveaway. So
Yes.
just give us the full answer in an episode like that, I think is the
Exactly.
nice thing to do.
Yeah, and I think that the other thing that we were onto was that Mark's wife was going to be some kind of reveal, because we're all savvy television watchers and we know when you don't see a picture of the person, when you don't see the person, they're hiding it for a reason. So
Mhm.
yeah, so now we're here. Now we're in the post Miss Casey reveal universe.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to live in that world for a number of reasons. One of which is because it means we are one step closer to Severance Season 2, which returns January 17th. Weekly coverage here on RHAP. We Know Scripted TV. Subscribe. Tell a friend. We Know Severance. Look it up on your podcast player of choice or go to RHAP We Know Scripted TV and WeKnowSeverance.com. You'll get all the subscriber info that way. The other reason I'm really excited that the Gemma reveal has happened is now I feel like we can maybe spend a beat like going back quickly and talking through like Miss Casey's prior appearances
Mhm.
and how those are colored differently now, whether it's that scene of Mark and Miss Casey passing each other in the hallway and there being this
Mhm.
sort of like forelonging that maybe neither of them can quite appreciate or access in that moment, whether it's Miss Casey and Mark's wellness session where he's building the tree that she has allegedly crashed into. There's just, Melissa, there's a ton in here, not the least of which also is this gives really chilling new meaning to the idea of like a part-time innie, that this is Gemma that we're talking about here.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like even just what we know about Gemma herself. But yeah, it's very funny. A friend of the pod, Josiah, said, I keep forgetting these latest podcasts are spoiler free-ish, and it's been effectively giving the vibe that you all are severed, but have given clues by your outies and
Totally.
kind of know what's going
100%.
on.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Definitely feels that way rewatching it. It's like, oh yeah, like, oh, that's what this card in my pocket's about.
yeah, and we keep sort of being like, yeah, this thing that isn't that interesting that he's, doing this tree sculpture and whatever, and trying not to reveal anything. I think we've probably been doing a bad job of it. So apologies.
I think we've
to
been
any-
doing fine. I think we've
Yeah.
been doing just fine.
But yeah, it's
We haven't even told everybody about the aliens yet, so like we're good.
Mm.
We're clear.
Yep. We, the goat milk factory under Lumen is still
Yeah.
under wraps. So
Mhm.
yeah,
The flood. Oh God, the flood.
it's Noah's Ark up in here. Yeah, so
Except milk instead of ocean.
just goat milk. Gosh, I've been playing so much Stardew Valley the last few weeks, so that's
I
goat
just
milk to
downloaded
goat
it.
cheese. Yeah, I recently learned that you can play it on mobile, which was not information I needed to have. This is bad.
Yeah, this is bad information.
This is bad for
This is
me. I
great
should've-
information, but bad information as well.
Yeah.
That we're passing. Okay, sever this part from the podcast. We don't want to inflict
I'm
this
so
upon
sorry to anybody who
the
didn't know.
listeners. Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, it's super interesting because I think that it gives, first of all, we've got Selvig in here being like, does Mark ever think that he recognizes her, whatever? So it's clearly,
Mhm.
it raises as many questions as it answers, which I think is very interesting because it's, it's satisfying that we sort of get these answers, but it's just, okay, but now we need more
does it
because
mean?
it's like, okay, what does it mean that she seems to be here? Like, it doesn't seem like she leaves. She's sort of been referred to as a part-time innie. And then also, like, how is she here? Like, how did that happen with the car accident of it all? And then the fact that, like, is she just here as like a test for Mark, or is there more going on? And like Selvig asking Devin, like, oh, does he ever think that he sees her? What's going on? And so then it's like, is there clearly, Mark hasn't clued into that up until this point, which is interesting because I think it tells us something about the severance procedure, but also, like, are there more tests down there for other severed people? Is Mark
Mhm.
Right.
special? Like, why? Again, as many questions as it answers. So, yeah.
Dr.
Yeah.
Amanda, can you locate where your mind was in terms of some theories around Miss Casey and Gemma? This big reveal around the two of them, because like she's dead, but maybe she's not dead or clone. Like I feel like these were the
Yeah,
directions that our
yeah.
brains were starting to go in.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for asking, Josh, because I do think that this gives a little bit of fodder for the clone theory,
Yeah, let's
because
do it.
we know that whatever the circumstances are that brought Miss Casey / Gemma there, they're different than what brought our severed employees there, which was that they were hired by Lumon. They had a job. They decided to do this. They underwent a procedure willingly and of sound mind. And what we know about Gemma is that she was in a very serious car crash. It's possibly was a fatal car crash, at least that's what Mark was led to believe. We don't know what kind of funeral or ceremony she might have had. We don't know what happened to her body, but it seems like there's some way that Lumon has obtained either Gemma or Gemma's DNA, and either they used some of their medical technology to resuscitate somebody who was believed to be injured so badly that it was fatal, or they use that technology to replicate her in some way. The fact that they have restored Gemma, or this Miss Casey version of Gemma, to a place where she can interact. We know that she interacts and is like animate and behaving and lucid, at least for a part of a day. We don't know if her technology can, or her state can sustain the same amount of time being up and about as we know of the innies, but there's something about her state that appears to be different. We've commented on it many, many times. Like,
Yeah.
is that because she is is that because she is not been restored to her full capacity, or is it because there's something a little bit more primitive about the technology that has led her to be? I don't think we fully know that, but it's interesting because we're talking about what Mark might recognize or remember about Gemma, but is there also a consciousness in Miss Casey that could remember Mark, that exists there in some form? If she was a cloned version of Gemma, she would not retain any sort of consciousness. It would be another genetically identical individual who has not had the same experiences
Right.
as Gemma has had. But if they've somehow used technology to restore Gemma, then we might expect there to be some kind of trace of a memory. So it's a crucially important detail how she comes to be. And we see that Miss Selvig is obviously very interested in Mark's reaction to Miss Casey. We haven't exactly seen whether Miss Casey whether there's the same interest in Miss Casey's possible recognition of Mark.
Yeah. Miss Cobell in this episode, she's undercover lactation specialist. She goes in and tries to help Devin out with this really horrifying infant.
Yeah.
The infant doll is the
Mhm.
scariest thing that's been on the show so far for me. And we're gonna go through all of that with her, but we're also going to have this scene where she goes to Natalie, who has the board on the phone, and Harmony is going to say, reintegration is real, and I would love to prove that to the board in person, no intermediaries. And we hear that there is going to be an occasion to do exactly that coming up in a week's time, I think they said.
Yeah.
The big Egan Family Gala. So put that on your calendar. Maybe we'll get to check in on that. But I do think that as we're talking about like the importance of Mark and Gemma being alive and how this relates to Mark, I think, Amanda, like you're really rightly observing that this is just as important as far as like, at least one of the things that I'm thinking about is like, yeah, it's very easy, I think, to get into like, okay, is Mark sort of like the center of whatever experiment is happening here? But is it the other way around, Melissa? And is it like Gemma is the center of the experiment and Mark's participation here is like super important for seeing just how activated she can become?
Yeah, totally fair. And then it's like, yeah, are the others just like negative controls in this
Right.
whole thing? But that again, it seems like a lot of people, so I don't totally know. I will say the thing this episode that's got me more on board of the clone train than anything else is
Yes,
the frequent
join us.
the frequent references to DNA when Ragabi's telling Mark not to puke on site, which by the way he then goes and does. So that's one of my theories up on the board, is that maybe Mark then gets, in trouble because they find his DNA at the site of the crime. I don't know.
Never leave your puke at the site of the crime.
Yeah, like she's specifically like, don't do that, and then he immediately goes and does it. So
well, they say in Spinal Tap you can't dust for vomit.
Fair. That's fair. You could dust the vomit, but
yeah. But anyway, so just the kind of like specific reference to DNA did make me wonder, like, is there, does Ragabi know a lot about DNA because she's been involved in cloning? I don't know. It's a bit of a stretch, but I'll take it.
Can we talk about Ragabi? Because we've been getting these mystery phone calls along the way, little cell phones buzzing along, and now we have a character on the other side of this, briefly introduced at the end of the most recent episode, and here in Defiant Jazz, making a real, let's call it, impact very, very swiftly here on her time on the show. That's because she hits Doug Grainer over and over again in the head, who we don't like, by the way. We don't like him. Or shall we say didn't like him. He did.
Yeah.
R.I.P. Doug Grainer.
Rip
We hardly
Grainer.
knew you, but what we knew, we despised. It seemed like a fitting end. He had this coming. I was glad to see Ragabi make quick work of this.
Very bad security person, I think, Doug Grainer. So focused on the security for the severed floor of Lumon that he never thought to secure himself.
Yes.
Yeah. Can I say, in watching this, I do sort of feel like the Ragabi bit of this story is like the least interesting, exciting part of this show. Like it's kind of the most uninteresting.
Like the mystery of Ragabi.
Like, I think it's just one of those where I like, if you asked me like, hey, what happens in Severance season 1? Mark meeting Ragabi and her killing Grainer would be like way down the list of things that I brought up. Like, it's just, and I don't know if that's simply because like, it's how they get the security card. It's like, we needed to get from A to B, or if it's just like, we'll be coming back. We needed something with, there's all the reintegration side of things. So maybe that will come back around in season 2. I just feel like it's not a very interesting storyline compared to everything else that we're dealing with. And maybe it's just that we don't know anything about Ragabi as a character.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sort of like interested to see if in season 2 it comes back and we actually get more out of it. But I'm also sort of like totally fine if we don't, because it's just the least interesting part of this show.
Inevitably, things like from a first season get discarded and don't make it into the second season. Like, I could see that being a character like this, but the reintegration storyline seems to be like really central to the show. So someone else would have to carry that forward, Amanda.
My theory is that Mark will undergo reintegration in season 2, because also she talks about like if he had followed
the directions. I think that's a very fair criticism, Melissa. Like, I agree totally that character is the most forgettable. She's pretty disconnected from the things that we care about, and we don't understand her motivation. We don't understand her connection to other characters like, Cobell and Milchek and all the people that we associate with Lumon. do think that it's fair to say that like this reads more as a plot device than as a character, which I think is a bit of a weakness, but something that, you know, there's so much packed into the 9 episodes that is season 1.
Totally.
If we somehow, maybe not in Ragabi's character being a big part of the show, but at least give some context to explain the motivation of who she is as a character, or what the movement around her, or whatever that faction of disillusioned Lumon people represents, then that would, I think, go a long way towards rectifying what I think is a fair weak point in season 1.
I think it's very brave of us to be taking this anti-Ragabi stance when we just watched her beat the hell out of Doug Grainer.
Yeah.
I disavow violence in all forms.
Brought him to the break room,
Yeah.
the final break. Doug Grainer, what a weird character on this show.
Yeah.
I think.
I think that's the other part of it, is like Grainer dies and we're like, well, oh, well, like, I don't even know that I feel like, oh, wow, what's going to be the fallout of that?
Right.
It's just more like, again, the security card is the most interesting part of that. So I think that is the other thing, is that I'm not like, I have zero emotion about Grainer's death.
Kind
one
of a
way or the other.
non-player character type of guy.
Yeah,
Very
a little
much so,
bit.
yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think like sort of like in like Sopranos terms, Amanda, like a little Mikey Palmisi.
Yeah.
I think with Mr. Grainer here, like a memorable season 1 antagonist gone before their time, and I think like that's part of the point, is that he was being set up as this kind of formidable character. The great Kevin Mahadeo would call this the Worf effect, I believe, is what happens here, where people on Star Trek would show up, and if they could beat the shit out of Worf, you're like, uh-oh, that guy's tough. And so I feel like Ragabi kills Grainer. It's like, uh-oh, Ragabi's tough. So like Grainer's sort of like in here for that. But I have a lot of questions about his tactics of like, what did he think was going to happen in there? He goes in there, he knows he's talking to some. It was just not deft at all. He hadn't scouted that there was like a secret little hallway that like really didn't like scope out the landscape of this place at all. So,
and he tried to play good cop, like he tried to make kind eyes.
Yeah,
it wasn't working.
No.
Don't bring kind eyes to a baseball bat fight, I think, is one of the lessons that Severance teaches us this week. So we don't have an LVP section, but I think this would go to Grainer for me for the for unnecessarily getting murdered. He did not.
Yeah.
That dude got himself killed. That dude got himself murdered. No sympathy for the devil here. Can you believe that we've made it 20 minutes into this podcast without really talking about the music dance experience? I know we're throwing a lot of erasers up on the board right now, and we have also discussed the greatest of the finger traps being death once again. Grainer finds himself enmeshed in that. The next step that we normally take here would be to go to the music dance experience, which in the case of this episode is the literal music dance experience. Mr. Milchick, in order to make Dylan feel better about the trauma he sustains from waking up on the outside, decides he can see if I can't rustle up a couple perks for you, Dylan. And here it is, the MDE. The MDE of the hour, a music dance experience as performed by Mr. Milchick, as chosen from a menu of different music types. I have to imagine, Dr. Amanda, you either have this memorized or you are going to be able to find it relatively quickly. But the various different types of music dance experience that you could get on this show leaves the brain percolating for a second season MDE, or what could have been here instead of Defiant Jazz.
So, Josh, you can have your body funk, bouncy swing, buoyant reggae, Defiant Jazz, which we saw, effusive ska.
Yeah, I really would like to see that.
Exalted choral, exciting rap, and I can only assume that could also be RHAP.
Yes,
podcast, the home of We Know Scripted
Hibiscus
TV.
Rap.
Yeah, Hibiscus RHAP.
The Hibiscus RHAP. Hootin' Tootin' Country.
A favorite, I think. Hootin' Tootin' Country, I think, is a top pick.
lofty orchestral, maximized rhythms, playful punk, reckless disco, spooky ambient, tearful emo, thoughtful grunge, wholesome big band, and wistful pipes.
Yeah. Once upon a time, the Severance podcast took on the form of the Severance Media Club, where each
Yeah.
month we selected a different Severance adjacent topic with which to explore Severance, sort of. One of those months, Melissa, was Reckless Disco.
Yeah, it was a very strange episode in which we were like, let's do a reckless disco podcast, and then realized that podcasts usually have more to be based off of.
Well, I think that
this
that
to
was
a
an
description.
all-timer. I think it was
It was
great.
pretty
I
good.
enjoyed it
I
greatly,
also
but yeah.
made a reckless disco Spotify playlist.
That's right.
That's
Is that
true.
still up and running?
Oh yeah, I'm sure I can locate
How many
that.
people
We
had
can-
that on their Spotify hibiscus
Yeah.
rap?
That was-
I'd
Yeah.
be very curious.
That was very good, Josh.
Thank you, Melissa. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I remember we learned about disco as like a dance
Mhm.
music movement, which I thought was cool.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, 6 saves on Dr. Amanda's reckless
All
disco
right.
playlist.
Just
And
this year or lifetime?
I assume it's
It's
the
just this year.
most
It's just this year.
charitable interpretation of that. But
It's just this year.
also I discovered the song Reckless by the Disco Fries.
That's right.
Right. I
Mhm.
forgot about that.
Mhm.
That's right. So we get to see not Reckless Disco, but Defiant Jazz, and it is Trammell Tillman as Mr. Milchick with his white turtleneck on. If you are one of the people who is on an informed guided tour of Severance, as opposed to somebody who has watched the show before, and this is your first time through, I think that there is a decent shot that at some point in your life you have either seen this as a
Mhm.
GIF, or if you have ever searched for Severance as a GIF, this was among the very first things that showed up. Amanda, about as gifable a moment as this series has produced ever, but certainly up to this point.
It's so exquisite, and upon watching it now, like I recognized all of the gifts that I've seen,
Mhm.
hundreds and thousands of times. But then even the non-GIF moments were those that like surprised and delighted me. This is like wall to wall perfection in terms of the composition of the scenes, the dance moves. Trammell Tillman is a, all-time great performer. If there's a award for best dance performance in a television show, I think it has to go to him. I remember reading at the time that in filming this, he had to change out his cashmere turtleneck several times because he was sweating so much.
I believe that.
Yeah.
It's amazing. The facial expressions, the moves, the disco lights. It's just beautiful and so bizarre. And this is a show that had been bizarre. We had been surprised and delighted by the absurd surrealism of it, but none of us saw something like this coming.
No.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's any that I don't think that the music dance experience itself was necessarily super on our radar as a thing to expect.
No.
But I do believe that like Defiant Jazz as the name of the next episode, we were like wondering what that could be. And Melissa, I don't think that like what it ends up being could have been on any of our Cure Bingo cards.
No, I don't think so. And what an interesting choice for Helly to make. And then, we get Dylan's attack, defiancy of the whole thing at the same time. And yeah, it's just the whole bit. First of all, also underrated. Helly is also a great dance. Like, I kind of want the two of them to just like go off for a little while. And Adam Scott is doing his best. He's got a little bit.
Yeah,
of
Adam
movement
Scott,
there.
not a great. I mean, I don't know if we have to attribute this poor dancing to Adam
Yes.
Scott.
Mark
This could
Scott,
be Mark
maybe
Scout.
Mark. at least,
Yeah.
Mark S might, this Mark S has never danced before.
Yeah, which is, it's sort of interesting. It had me thinking about the purpose of this, right? The fact that there is probably not a lot of music that the innies are experiencing at all. And so it's like the certain things in life that are missing, that are kind of held back, and what the small, so for example, the handbook being like kind of one of the only books that they can read,
Right.
or the snacks in the machine being some of the only food that they have. And so it's like when you take away so many of the things that make life good and enjoyable and fun, and so then you're given these like small tastes of it, that you will accept these like tiny little kind of samples of things.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of interesting the role that the music dance experience plays as a reward system, because people down there are craving anything like this.
Yeah.
Also,
The MDE is to music and dancing as shriveled raisins are to food.
Yeah, exactly.
Delicious.
Yeah, and I love Irving's shade that Nelly should have picked the castanets. It's just very funny.
Yeah, yeah. What does she pick? She picks like
Maraca.
The
she
maracas.
picks the maracas. Yeah, that's right. I think that this sequence is so great for the obvious reasons. I think it also does a very good job of encapsulating the themes of Severance in a sequence. Like, I think that this scene as metaphor for the entirety of Severance is so good because it is this so surreal, unexpected delight. It's like these bright lights. You are the character, just as we are saying, like, we have never seen something like this. To your point, Melissa, like, magnify that 1,000-fold for these people who are like experiencing music and dance like this for the very first time in their entire lives. It's an insane way of experiencing it. And I think for us, this felt like a very fresh, bold new show in the same way. But as the experience goes on, it turns. There are moments where it goes from being this sort of like whimsical, surrealist lark, just like jazzing around, like free form, to like being like the acidic part of acid jazz, and like something really caustic beginning to bubble up until it just like boils over in the form of Milchick and Dylan. Milchick is just hovering around, like henpecking the air right next to Dylan's head for a long period of time before Dylan decides to put hands on Mr. Milchick.
Hands and teeth.
Yeah.
Hands and teeth.
He like puts his imprint in, like he's at the dentist.
And it's so perfectly in line with the tone that we've recognized from Milchick from the start, where it's like he's riding this line between being like enticing and alluring, like, come on and dance, and also being very menacing and threatening to Dylan. And we know that they have shared this experience in the last episode where Dylan is aware of his life outside as an outie, and he's also aware that they can now, bring their innies to life on the outside. He's no longer going to be as enticed and rewarded by the contrived world of the severed floor now that he has ringing in his ears the voice of his son saying daddy and being happy to see him. Like, Melissa, just to your point, it's like those types of experiences are what motivate and sustain people, not finger traps and these very contrived dance parties. And there's a way that Milchick's whole demeanor is both, trying to be the paternalistic caretaker, but also the guard, the torturer, the tormentor.
Yeah, it's an incredible metaphor, and it so quickly turns from this like nice moment to this sort of menacing kind of, this is what you're supposed to be enjoying and you better step in line sort of experience. And Dylan's not having it. And for Dylan to be the one who is so like this, like the fact that this is one of the rewards and Dylan is the one who's like, no, this is not worth it right now, is so powerful. And we're going to get kind of a similar turn from Irving by the end of the episode. And it is just such a interesting way that they show how each of them individually gets sort of radicalized in the situation. And yeah, anyway, it's super interesting. And like Dylan from this moment on is just such a fascinating character, as he's talking about that he's his son and he's got the strength of two men and he's volunteering to stay behind to help them, that they all deserve to see the outside too. And he becomes this like really committed to the cause of bringing down Lumon. from this moment, which I think is so fascinating.
The
And then-
hero we deserve.
Yeah.
And also raised the question
certainly.
for me, if it takes two people to hold down the switch during the OTC, who did that for Milchek while he was talking to Dylan?
Oh,
Question. I have no idea.
it
But
wasn't Grainer. He was occupied.
yeah, exactly. And it wasn't Cobell because she didn't know. So
Right. Yeah. So clones.
clones.
Probably some
Yeah.
Milchek clones.
Probably.
Couple of extra Milcheks lying around. But it's so cathartic to like in its like really twisted way. It's very cathartic to see like Dylan be the one who breaks, and also to see that Dylan really does have this like moral center that matters a lot more than the prizes that he's winning. And I think like the idea that the world that we live in, we are doing all of these things. We're, rounding up numbers, scary numbers into buckets. Like, what are we doing? What am I doing with my life? That eventually, like, you should be thankful that I'm dancing for you and playing a song for you, for that to like turn into like snapping back and biting the hand that feeds you. Only tracks, I think, to real life. And so I think that the ways in which that plays out on this show, in this scene, and then, when you add on top of it, like Irving, who is the most devout, egonist of the lot of all the people that we've met, going and, once they've been locked in, Mark has the security card, they're able to get out. That Irving immediately goes to see Bert because he has been separated from Bert for too long, only to find that Bert is in like some measure of forced retirement, basically, is what's happening. Presented as this really good thing and this celebratory thing. But the way that when you then see like Audi Bert talking to all the innies on video, it's like you've left a profound impact on my soul, though I have no idea who any of you are, and I never will. I suspect I'll bring you with me in a part of my soul that I could never access, like really hammering the point home. And I think like this sort of office death that we experience on the show here, and that Irving specifically experiences, is such like a great way, again, of like finding a way to dramatize I'm sure a lot of people listening to this have had the experience of like showing up for work and a colleague that you really care about is suddenly gone, for like no reason that seems like explicable at all. It's like your company, the corporation, has decided that this person who's obviously indispensable is dispensable, like whatever it is. And this is Irving seeing that. And I think Bert leaving Lumon in this way, with just a handshake between these two guys to show for it, I think is a really, really, really brutal turn of events that makes his line, "You smug motherfucker," be like just one of the great line reads of when did this show come out again? Like 1830?
Yeah.
Anyway, of that year, whatever year that was.
Yeah, the 1-2 punch of that, and then let's burn this place to the ground is
we love it.
Incredible.
It's great. And what you were saying, Josh, I think it also speaks to the feeling, like the ambivalence that so many people have around retirement. It's like the death of your work self. It's like this phase of your life where you felt useful in this particular way is behind you. Only this is obviously all the more profound because, like you said, it's basically a funeral. And for any Irving, this is the end of his relationship with Bert, which we have come to know means so much to him. I think it's really interesting that it's Dylan discovering that he's a father. It's Bert falling in love. In some ways, I think it's Mark's friendship with Petey and his concern for Helly. It's these real human connections. It's this actual, the meat of life, love, relationships, caring for one another, that breaks these innies of this spell where they're kind of controlled by all of the, extremely trivial rewards and punishments and the maze that they're basically rats trapped in Lumon, that they kind of transcend that and they become, dare I say, the use they is.
Oh, the use they is. That's pretty good.
Yeah. But I
Well
feel like
said.
it's
You
a
just broke literature with that one.
I did. I feel like it's a blossoming of the true self and some kind of moral development that they're undergoing through having these experiences that the world of the severed floor has tried so hard to deprive them of.
Yep, definitely. So, anyone want to put any other erasers on the board? We've dumped a bunch already this week. I actually did have one that developed watching the Bert scene, the Bert goodbye party, which was watching the way that Audi Bert interacts with the innies through the video, and the way that like Bert is kind of talking about the experience in his life makes me feel like, was this some sort of like retirement gift to Audi Bert? Was like is like O&D or some of these places for like him, for Felicia, these people who are a little bit older, is this like, is like going to Lumen like going to daycare, you know? Like, is this like
Oh,
introducing some measure of play to these people again, and this is why what they're actually working on maybe doesn't
like
matter
this
at
is
all?
like the retirement
A
community.
little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the thing
Mhm.
that I was thinking about, and, like, if that's the case, like, I would imagine, like, have to be, like, pretty well off in order to, like, arrange for that, or, like, owed a bunch, which makes
Mm.
me feel like Audi Bert could be a decently connected guy.
Something else I noticed about Audi Bert is he's wearing a ring in his scene, which suggests
Oh.
that he might be married. And so that's something Irving might have also noticed. Um, yeah, it's interesting that because I mean I was gonna put Bert also in the finger traps area
Yeah.
because like we know that Petey kind of left abruptly. We've heard about Carol D, and that, that was planned. And we imagine that the Carol D situation might have been similar, where they got a video and they like had some fanfare because Mark
Got some
alludes to it.
watermelon.
They probably
Mhm.
got the good melon that they only whip out for the special occasions. But we don't really understand the circumstances under which people are allowed to leave Lumen, except that Helly has tried her darndest to leave. We know that Mark and Petey also tried to leave previously. So they don't like people to leave. When people leave, it's often under, at least with Petey, it was under these, extremely treacherous circumstances. And what exactly kind of life do they allow these formerly severed employees to have on the outside? Is there any risk associated with them being out there in the world? I just would be concerned. Bert is obviously old and people do, retire at some point. But understanding the circumstances under which he's been allowed to retire and what Lumen allows retirement to look like is something that I still have some concerns about.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Further finger traps that I had, Grainer, obviously, Bert I had on here as well. Milchick's shoulder,
Yeah, I had
Ooh,
Milchek
yeah.
as well. I was like,
Gonna need a
dude's
tetanus
in trouble.
panel.
Yeah.
he needs a health and wellness session, or at least some stitches, maybe. He
Yeah.
broke the skin.
Yeah.
What
Despite the
about
bite through the shoulder.
Cobell? I think
Yeah.
Cobell is potentially
Is
in
it
danger.
Cobell or is it the board? She's
Mm.
talking a very big game.
Mhm.
Either way, that is a really bubbling, tense interaction that she has with the nonverbal board by way of Natalie. And I
Mhm.
think a fun thing that we've been, appreciating about Cobell along the way here is like going back to that very first episode. Here she is in a lesser office, right? Like she's moving stuff in.
Mhm.
She seems in many ways, while a powerful person, to be like a bit destabilized. The whole Selvig thing is very strange. And is she freelancing on a project there? And she's very focused on this reintegration thing that her superiors don't seem to want to know about. So like, just how on or off message is she? And depending on the answer to that, I think gives us a little bit of insight into like who's in more danger, Harmony, Cobell, or the silent board. I don't know.
Yeah. I also think there's like this element of danger to like Dylan and Irving, this like radicalization that they've experienced, that they are no longer going to go along with, following in line of Lumon's rules and being happy with these rewards and this theology. So yeah, the only other thing that I wanted to point out back in the erasers category is Milchek refers to the icon card that Dylan had as the missing 7199G Oswald.
Okay.
And I was like, I don't know what that is. So I don't actually have a theory around this, but I was just like, that's a very random thing to call this card. So I don't know.
The 7199G Oswald.
Yeah.
I haven't found that Joker in Balatro yet, but I'm still looking.
Yeah.
The cards. You know what was interesting to me? Milchik decides to go back to work and change the walls, and we spend like a solid 20-second segment on him just like opening and closing and opening and closing the door, and then he goes to the bathroom and retrieves the card. Wouldn't you think that'd be the first thing you did? You woke the guy up outside of the office. Go get that card.
Or it seemed like a big deal, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just feel like
instead we have to test this door 6 times. I was like, buddy, I think it works.
I think he's overworked is the point. Like I think like they're asking Milchik to do too many things, wearing way too many hats.
Dance.
He's meeting everybody as they get down the door. Like I was like, this has to just be the MDE.
He's
right?
the only
yeah.
He's the only person in that whole building that seems to be doing any work.
Who else is working? Who else is working at Lumon?
I mean, according to that panel, like 18 other severed employees. So
yeah,
I was counting green lights.
I know that. Oh, that's right. In the overtime contingency in the security room.
Yeah.
Any interesting observations from that we would like to put out there? Cool set piece. Would love to see again.
Yes. So there's a lot of other departments we can assume, right? We see these different initials for things that we haven't heard about yet. We notice that there's a lot of different employees. So, I mean, I think that there's a lot of eraser fodder in here. Let me see, the numbers change. There's CL, there's WN, or CL for clones.
Naturally. Clone lab.
The clone lab, the CL, that's WN, that could be weird
name
nonsense. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's obviously, I think, a lot of different shenanigans that are going on in this in this area with the monitors, and a lot of things that we can. Another point though, which we've highlighted a few times, is they're allowed to continue to get away with a lot more than you would expect, given that Milchek seemingly stayed up all night making sure that they couldn't get out of that room, and then they almost immediately get out of that room and start going to other departments and finding the secret security room and stealing pages of a protocol. So while they're suffering consequences and people are paying attention selectively, there's still quite a bit that they're getting away with.
They're defiant jazz musicians, they're out here. They learned from the best. They're just rebelling.
I mean, Helly points out, right? They're like, oh, the security office where the security guards are. And she's like, there's only greener. It's like I've been telling you this whole time that it's like not real. And so it's like, yeah, there's a lot of cameras, but if nobody's there to watch them, then it doesn't really matter. So
yeah. And part of me is like, how much is that intentional on the show's part versus it's like just convenient for like getting like action to happen? I'm not going to be like overly annoyed or anything if it's that second thing. Like, we got to move the show along. We got to move plot.
Right.
Like if like you get hung up on, there would be more secure. Like, it's like, well, we're watching this.
Yeah.
We're watching this
But
differently.
because Helly is bringing it up makes me think that we're allowed to notice it. If they didn't want us to notice it, then they would yada yada a bit more.
Again, for me, it's the question of like, is this like deliberate from a plot perspective that there is a really important reason why it seems like either understaffed or whatever, or is it again like this more like sort of like anti-capitalist, anti-work, sort of messaging here of like Like these people are just like so arrogant that they feel like that these people will never figure out that they have any power anyway. So what's really the point? The illusion of power has created such, a stranglehold on this that like it doesn't even matter. And is that the point? Like as like we're really like in this sort of like revolution era of Severance in this part of the season. So I don't know, but it's definitely conspicuous, and it's definitely important that Helly calls it out. Not just because like maybe that means this thing that they're planning is achievable, but also just generally, like security is lax on the severed floor of Lumon. They should probably look into that. There's a new vacancy at the top of the security chain.
Yeah, maybe Grainer wasn't very good at his job, kind of all around. So
yeah, I think that seems likely, seeming likelier and likelier by the day. Okay, so finger traps, erasers taken care of. The music dance experience, self-explanatory. Best vibes of the episode indeed is Defiant Jazz, I think. And then it's also like the worst vibes, but that's the vibes. For caricature portrait, I was trying to think what's the funniest moment of the episode. And for me, I actually went a different way and decided that the caricature portrait could, for this week, be the saddest thing that's in the episode. It's everything with Gemma when he rips up the caricature portrait and then puts it back together. And Mark Scout is saying all the things that he loves about her in a voice that feels very much his, but in a style that feels very much health and wellness and very Miss Casey. So this way in which these two things are fusing is just like so emotionally fulfilling for such a great final beat to this episode. That's got to be my caricature portrait. It's just so beautifully done.
Great final beat of the episode. It would have been pretty funny if instead of ripping up a photograph, he ripped up one of those caricature portraits.
What if in the universe of Severance, like all photos were just caricature portraits? It's like, this is my beautiful wife. Look at her. And it's like her giant head.
Yeah.
Tiny little like stick figure body.
Yeah, she's like
waving,
holding a microphone and like pretending to be
music notes in the background. Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. You meet her in real life and you're like, oh wow, your ears really aren't that big in real life.
Yeah. Your head's a lot smaller than it's on the paper.
Yeah.
I respect the defiant answer to that question.
That's my Defiant Jazz in the caricature portrait this week.
I mean, I was also torn, and so I'm going to give mention to both of the moments that were vying for my attention. I have to I mean, this was such a breakout Milchek episode for me. And I'm not done talking about him in this section of the podcast, but I think that the dancing, like Trammell Tillman's dancing, some of these moves are so funny that they made me laugh again after having seen them in GIF form more times than I can count. And I think that they deserve a nod there. I also a nod like this, the kind of chicken nod. And then I'm also like, I'm just such a sucker for Christopher Walken's delivery. And while it's a very sad scene, the whole speech that comes out of his Audi's mouth is hilarious. Like, he's worked there. I've worked here nearly 7 years with you, and I hope they've been good years. I don't know what they've been like or exactly what I've been doing with you, but I know how I feel every day when I come home with being with you. Although today is my last day, I'm certain you will remain with me in spirit in some deep yet completely inaccessible corner of my mind. The impression you've left with me is indelible, although I'm unaware of it on a conscious level. I will forget any of you, even though sitting here now, I have no recollection of actually ever meeting you. Like, it's hilarious, and it's so farcical, and it's such a funny way of presenting everything that we know about the severance procedure and why it is funny and tragic and sad.
It's giving Connor Roy's funeral speech for Mo. It's like Mo was alive. Now he is not. It just like has that same vibe.
And part of the sad thing about this
Bert G was interested in politics from a young age.
Just write that down. Part of the reason that it's so funny is because it's sad, right? I mean, I think that this is why, this is how the best humor works, is it allows us to talk about this very sad thing And seeing an older character retire and retreat from part of their life, and knowing that like some of these memories are going to fade. This is something a lot of us experience with people in our lives. And just finding a way to talk about why that's meaningful and important, like the work is meaningful and or important. There's something that's very sad about how all of this is fleeting. Like a lot of the things that you do will be remembered. A lot of them won't be remembered. A lot of people who care about you might not remember every important detail and everything. And that's like just something that's really hard for us to grasp about the human experience. So I thought this was very, very funny, even though it was also very sad. And
That's a great shout. Yeah.
I could listen to Christopher Walken read the phone book and I would thoroughly enjoy it.
I think more Christopher Walken delivered retirement speeches.
Oh, yeah. Oh, if he was
You
on
could get mine
Cameo,
one
we
day.
could
Let's just like
clean up.
pre-record. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you could just send him retirement speeches. He could read them.
Yeah. So that was all like beautiful and meaningful. And I feel like my caricature portrait is exactly
Do it,
opposite of
Melissa.
that. It's Patricia Arquette acting out the angry fire hose.
Oh, yeah. The boob hose.
That I was just like, what is happening? And she's telling the story to Devin and acting it out herself. It's just, for me, the fact that I was like, this is the Patricia Arquette. And it's just very funny to me.
I just finished Escape at Dannemora.
What did you think?
Oh my gosh. It was great. It's a heavy story, but it was great.
She's really, really great in it.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
She's amazing. Somebody made a joke that that she's been carrying Ben Stiller's career through her excellent performances. Yes. But like really amazing boobs on Patricia Arquette. I'm just gonna say it.
No doubt.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Yeah.
Co-signed. All right. Do we want to do a waffle party candidate now?
Yeah.
It's waffle party time.
Okay. Who are we advancing as our refiner of the quarter closer to getting a waffle party? And with just 2 episodes left, will we, dear viewer, find out what a waffle party is? Let's wait and see. I think I could kick us off. I'm gonna go with Irving. Is my MVP. I had it between 3 different people, and Irving was on the list. And I was just gonna make a game time choice, and it's Irving. You smug mother effer is just so one of the great lines of any year that TV may or may not have existed. Just absolutely unbelievable. And I think that that Irving was like the final domino that had to go down for like anything that's going to come next. This like sort of like unity that we find MDR in by the end of the episode. That does not happen unless Irving is able to sort of just like really wake up and stop, like seeing the ooze and just like moving on. Like the ooze is coming. You got to deal with that. So he's awake and he's part of this team now. And I think it's just such a good performance from John Turturro that Irving's my guy. Melissa, who do you got?
I also went with Irving.
Yeah.
Basically from the moment he starts running down the hallway, like, I'm sorry, Mark, I'll be back. And then he does his little like mustache finger comb.
Yes, he wants to look his best.
Which is so cute. This like emotional speech that he gives about this being the end of Bert. And then the like that handshake leading into the 2 best lines of the episode of smug mother effer and then burn this place to the ground. And just, like you said, the most kind of devotee of this whole group being the one who, through this like connection that he has, sees that there has to be more to what's going on than just kind of believing in this cause and working and doing the mysterious and important work because someone told you it was mysterious and important and that's all that matters. So I love it. It's so emotional and funny and moving at the same time. I like it's yes, many people have great episodes, but for me, Irving is the star of this episode for sure.
Mandy R, are you going to join us on the Irving train?
Well, I'm so glad that both of you honor Irving in this episode because I love Irving. He really has my heart, maybe as much, if not more, than any of the other characters. And I love the 2 lines that you called out. But I have to give my Waffle Party MVP of the Week award to Mr. Milchek, the
Sure.
only guy
much.
around here who's doing any work. He, for his dance moves, for the
He's
way
working.
he's working, for the way he fills out that cashmere sweater, all the blood and sweat and sweaters that went into the making of that scene. I think that this was such a standout episode for him, and I don't know if he's been honored yet with an MVP.
He has.
Okay.
You got him back in week 2, but this is
Sounds
only
like
the
me.
second point for
Okay.
Milchek. There are a couple of double point getters, a bunch of double point getters, actually. I think just about anybody who's gotten a point has also gotten a second point, with the exceptions of Petey and Bert. And Miss Casey, and maybe this week would have been a good one because she's Gemma's alive, kind of. So that would have been a decent spot, but John Turturro is just so good. So with that being said, last time out, we did not change anything on the leadership front, I don't think. I believe that we still had Mark Scout out in the front with 3 points towards being the refiner of the quarter. But with Irving getting 2 points,
Wow.
Irving is currently the clubhouse leader for the Waffle Party. 4 points for Irving, 3 points for Mark, 2 points for a bunch of other people, including, and perhaps limited to, let's see if I can do this, Devin, Miss Cobell, Helly, Dylan, Rickon, and now Mr. Milchek with double points.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what the standings are going into next week. This is the anti-penultimate Waffle Party session. Let's see what happens on next week's episode to see what other MVPs, LVPs we get. We still have a crystal head cube that we could each throw out. Not a prize, just a thing we give you. To Patricia Arquette's boobs.
Very worthy.
A
Yeah.
crystal head cube.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I paused this scroll of when Mark's looking on his phone at Gaines College, trying to see if there's any reporting of the murder, which there is, like, notably not, which is sort of interesting, and I think tells us something about the fact that maybe Lumon is trying to cover it up at the same time that they're investigating it. But the headlines that we do get, I just wanted to shout out. First one, new sculpture at Gaines, not pornographic, says administrators.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Important to clarify.
Yes.
Coyote sightings at Gaines College cause alarm. It turns out, great loss of habitat, and there's more coyotes in the winter, apparently.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Gaines College president on charity dunk tank says, "Bring it on." So,
So brave.
Can you
so
give me
brave.
that one more time?
Gaines College president on charity dunk tank quotes, "Bring it on."
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's his favorite time of year.
Yeah. My favorite, followed by the one I thought was most interesting. Gaines will no longer sell Friday High Day shirts, which I then read the description of underneath, and I can't believe I haven't noticed this before. Developed by the school's disc golf team.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Wow. Amazing work, Melissa.
Reckless
Great.
disc golf.
Yeah.
As a
Reckless
big
disc
ultimate
golf.
frisbee person, I thought this was very funny. And then the last one was Gaines College to announce scholarship winners. And the scholarship is for female students studying pharmacology and psychology, which to me seems like subjects you might need to know about if you, I don't know, worked at Lumon, were involved some way.
Melissa, are they recruiting us?
They might be recruiting us. Yes. We could go out for this scholarship. Probably went out for very similar types of scholarships. This is the kind of description that I would be like, oh yeah, perfect.
Okay, I'm going for this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so my wonder was, is this just a thought of, like, often scholarships are sort of in the name of somebody, the family that donates money or whatever. I was like, is this like a Helly named scholarship or something? Is there some way that this scholarship also ties back to Lumon? So that was sort of a thing I wondered.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's fun. I like that. Mandy R, did you throw a crystal head cube at anything?
Yeah, I want to throw my crystal head cube at cardigans, which I don't think actually look that ridiculous.
Fair enough.
I've been really in my cardigan era. I'm not
Yeah.
wearing one right now, and I feel like that's rare. Right now, like as often as I can be in a cardigan, I'm in one.
Yeah. What do you have against Mr. Rogers, Gemma?
I don't like that at all. Yeah. Does this make us reconsider even more about what we've heard about Gemma,
Yeah.
namely all of the wonderful things that Mark says?
I like that I like that she has a strong take.
That's
I
great,
appreciate
right?
a strong take. Yeah.
Like none of this wishy-washy,
No.
like middle of the Venn diagram, like
Mhm.
choose pancakes or waffles. Like
Right,
she'll
right.
do it.
Yeah, she'll do. I mean, she would be great on a podcast.
Yeah.
Coming in, cardigans, trash, get rid of cardigans. That's what we need for some lively conversation.
The amount of times I have like a mild opinion that just instantly gets like jacked up to 11 because it's like, well, I'm on a podcast, so I have to argue, and suddenly I'm
Don't
a hard
give away
line.
our secrets, Melissa.
I know.
It's true.
It's like maybe I don't really believe the clone theory as much as I've represented myself as. No, not that. Never that.
Never that.
I want to call out, though, I think I call bullshit on this idea that Mark loves equally the fact that she sneezes twice and is allergic to nutmeg as the fact that she was extraordinary and likes dogs.
Yeah, but isn't that what like love is? It's like it becomes those little tiny things that you're like, no, but that's really what makes them. I don't know. I thought that was very sweet.
I'm joking.
To, like, run through
Melissa
my
hates
mind
love,
of, like,
though. We know that.
I was trying to run through my mind
documented.
of like what would I say for like the Emily version of this, and
Mm.
like some of them would be like I would mean them with like all of my heart, and also like they wouldn't sound great to some of the other people, you know.
Yeah, fair enough.
I don't know. It was cute though. It's cute.
It is very cute.
Very cute, very intense episode of Severance. We are getting close to the end of the line here on season 1 of Severance, but not quite there. Next week, we ask the all-important question that has been asked previously on this very show. Minus the kids, it's What's for Dinner is the next episode of Severance. Make sure you're subscribed to the pod. We know severance.com. Tell a friend, clone yourself, subscribe again if you can. We know severance.com. You want to send in feedback, you can. severancerhap at gmail.com. That's severancerhap at gmail.com. We got a message this week from MS Casey at gaines.edu.
Oh my goodness.
Whoa.
And it was just 3 words. It was defy Aunt Jazz.
Okay.
So I think it was a command. If we ever come up with if we ever meet a person named Aunt Jazz, we cannot just bow immediately to this person. So I think that's my interpretation of it. Anyway, you can send in your own feedback. severancerhap at gmail.com if you want to get all of that in. You can also watch us on the video version where we did a little dances. The Defiant Jazz dance. Any pop star Never Stop, Never Stopping fans in the house? It's kind of donkey roll adjacent. If you know, you know. Follow these good people, what they're doing on the internet. Melissa, where can people find you? What's happened on the Whirlwind?
Melissa 28 over on Whirlwind. First of all, if anyone's out on watching Pop Culture Jeopardy, if you've been listening to Whirlwind, you're getting multiple answers correct on this show. There was a Girls 5 Eva and a Veronica Mars question in the same episode.
Ooh.
So that was my holiday watching experience. But yeah, we're talking Veronica Mars, we're talking Doctor Who. We're going to be recording our Christmas special coverage pretty soon. And with the great Chudi Gatwa is the current doctor and is killing it, is doing so good. And it's a really great entry point if you haven't been a Doctor Who person. It's kind of being slated as like, hey, you could just jump in here. So again, check it out. Highly recommend. Need something kind of Christmassy to watch? There you go. Otherwise, we're talking Schmigadoon and all sorts of musical stuff, Shameless, Pretty Little Liars. Yeah, anyway, all sorts of stuff over there.
Dr. Amanda, Where do the people find you? What do you got going on Crying Laughing?
Ooh, well, you can find me on Blue Sky at Dr. Amanda R. And Crying Laughing is great. We did our best of the year podcast talking about all of the television film from 2024 that we would want to highlight. And we are in the last 3 episodes of 6 Feet
Have you
Under, and it
figured out
is
what you're going to do next? Have
sad.
you decided?
We are still accepting suggestions. We have a couple of ideas for sort of shorter rewatches, like mini series to tide us over, but we are accepting suggestions still.
You're not
So
going
email
from
us.
you're not rebranding the podcast Balls to the Wall and it's another Alan Ball show and you go True Blood?
Wow. Oh my gosh. You know what? My husband has been rewatching True Blood here and there, and so I've been seeing parts of it, and there's some good True Blood, but there's some bad True
You know
Blood.
what? It's really unbelievably true.
It's really true. It's the blood
Like,
is
but that show was
true.
great. It was just like so
Yeah.
schlocky and soapy and good. And then
Mhm.
when it was really bad, it was so schlocky and
It was
soapy
so
and bad.
bad. It was
Yeah.
so bad. Oh, and the Sookie and Bill romance. It's
Yeah,
tough.
yeah.
It's okay.
Mhm.
So send us what you think. Maybe we'll get overwhelmed with True Blood recommendations, and that's where we'll need to go. So you can email us cryinglaughingpod@gmail with your recs. But yeah, catch up with 6 Feet Under for the last few episodes. It's so good. It's so sad. It's so meaningful. It's a
No.
lot. It's all the feelings. It's
Yes.
great.
I believe I know which episode you just finished, probably, if we're in those final things. Ah, man. Oh, boy. Okay. Well, check all that out. That's over at Crying Laughing. Make sure you're checking out everything that's happening here on We Know TV.com at Round Howard if you want to keep the convo going. Next week, we find out what's for dinner. Until then, everybody, we'll see you again. Take care. Bye-bye.